Okay, so now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Dr. Ann Whitney comes to us from Penn State University. She is a full professor there in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. Her work has tremendously influenced my work as a teacher of writing and a teacher of writers and a teacher of teachers of writing. And her work, though, looks at writing across a lifespan. She is curious about the ways that literacy education and writing instruction impacts learners in schools and out of schools, in the ways that they move from school into new places. So her work has included studies in schools, in homes, in communities, and in faith communities like churches. But what is at the heart of all of her work is this humanizing, nurturing wholeness of being a writer and being with writing and having writing be a thing that amplifies and brings out the best of who we are. She brings out the best of in me and in all the people and students that she's interacted and the teachers that she's interacted with over all these years. She's a prolific author and writer and thinker. She has a bunch of books that she brought with her that represent this wide range of her interests and her curiosity about what writing can do for teachers in her teacher writing reader coach book, for people who are just interested personally and thinking more about their own faith journey. She wrote a book called Inkwell that is beautiful. I recommend. She wrote an amazing book about reflective writers, building reflection. That's one of the key principles we know about writing instruction. And Anne worked with 2nd and 3rd grade teachers on thinking about how to build reflection in writing with their students. So if you're a 7th grade or a 9th grade or a 12th grade or a college teacher thinking, yeah, but my kids can't do that, Anne and her teachers that she wrote that book with, they will prove you wrong, because they're going to talk to you about how they did reflection with like 8 and 9-year-olds. Okay. And the last book that she has is a book in the NCTE Principles and Practice series called Growing Writers. And she outlines in that book some really essential principles of writing instruction. And then what follows are teachers talking about how those principles show up in practice. Today, she's going to be sharing with us from her heart the work that she's thinking about and the ways that she can help us think about writing for teachers and tutors and other human beings, and thinking about the powerful principle ways that writing can ground us and invite us to action and sustain our hearts and our work in this time. So please join me at the podium, Dr. Ann Whitney. Thank you.
And it's a good thing that I got this napkin from someone at my table, because I don't have tissues and there's already been crying. There might be snot soon. If you see anything really gross, just either overlook it or like let me know. To be here is to be able to bring my weird little kid self right into the room with Dr. Whitney. And there's not a whole lot of professional spaces that I've been in where that is the case. So thank you for your love and attention today. The work that I'm sharing has been done primarily in central Pennsylvania. It is the ancestral and current home of the Susquehannock Nation, and of course, many other Native American folks who have been made to travel or found themselves in need of travel across Pennsylvania, some of them ending up here and beyond in California. And also a lot of the work that you're going to hear about is done in Texas, primarily where the Caddo and Alabama Cochata folks lived and live today. And no land is without conflict, and neither is any life. And I hope that you'll hear some of that thread in what I'm about to say. It is such a treat to be at a conference that is tutors, people who direct and support tutors, and teachers not related to tutors, and then teacher leaders, and then university people who love teachers, or who at least you let us come play, so thank you. I first learned in a writing center that teaching was interesting to me. I wanted to be a writer, like I really wanted to be a writer, and I didn't know how you got that as a job, right? So people would say, oh, well, I mean, you can be a teacher. And I would say, oh, no. And that is because I was a really weird kid who was in pain most of the time at school. And so I'm leading from there to say that it was hard for me to see myself able to offer something else, someone else, a thing. And to do that in the school world, which can be very damaging and harmful. I mean, we do a lot of harm and we try to fix a lot of it, but there's a lot of harm done in school. And there was to me. Tutoring helped me see that it was mostly just helping a person say what they were trying to say. And the more I do it, the more I was able to say what I needed to say. So selfishly, that started to make sense. It was in the writing project earlier, a couple years later into my career, that I found that not only could teaching be interesting to me, but that I could be loved, and that being a writer and being a teacher could be the same thing in my life. So if that's not your experience yet, I hope that today gives you an idea as to what becomes possible when heart and soul and mind and story come together with principles and expertise. So that's a promise I'm trying to make today. I hope it works. Thanks for hearing me. Let me get these slides happening because I forgot that I was doing this. They're right here. And I'm going to move these controls out of the way if I can figure out how. There we go. Okay, here are a couple of my favorite writers. The person on the top is my son, William, and the person lower down holding a sign is my daughter, Emily. And these pictures are from years ago, but I want to point out that both of these writers are doing things that felt to them very important. My daughter is holding a sign in protest after a political event had occurred that she was not happy with as a girl and future woman. And my son in that picture is at a reading and writing camp where he was in certain ways the best writer and in certain ways the worst writer. And I feel like that a lot. Like if you're good at a couple things, but then if you're also not good at a couple things, it's hard to like know where to stand. Where to stand? Can I stand like my daughter with her hands up and her message clear in power during a moment in which her rights were being challenged? Can I be like my son, who is able to be creating and writing in vulnerability, whether he is being read as disabled or whether he is being read as a genius, right? So that's kind of a little preview of why I'm here and why. Let's start with the little writing. Can you get out your notebook, pencil, scratch paper, back of a napkin, whatever it is? This is a clock in my office. It is always time to write. I'm actually going to go back. So while you're getting out your things to write, what I want to do today is to share this message. The message is that writing matters. I think it's obvious. So like I tried to just pick something easy so that nobody had to stress too hard to learn anything today. No, writing does matter. And we say that, but I think it matters in ways that we forget or we are encouraged to ignore. I was a real weird kid, y'all. I'm a little weird now, or a lot weird now. But when I was a kid, I was disabled, sometimes visibly, sometimes not. Queer, sometimes pretty visibly, sometimes not. Really itchy and uncomfortable, pretty visibly all the time. Not very attentively parented. Not super affectionately loved. And as I will mention, but not traumatized in the form of some negative experiences early on in my life. I was a real weird kid, and I felt like a weird kid, a kid who needed to look and be a certain way, but that way was like a mystery. Writing has often been an important way for me to work through some of that stuff. So is that enough time for you to get out your materials? All right. Can you recall a time in your writing history when writing really felt important? Take just a few minutes. A time in your writing life when writing has really felt important. Important. As you finish the thought that you're on, you might have to make a couple notes of the next thoughts that you don't have time to write down. You could jot down what those were going to be. And we're going to turn and talk. People who are with us by Zoom, you are going to be able to share in the chat. Those of you who are in the room, can you turn and talk to one neighbor? I'm going to cover my ears. Can you turn and talk? What do you notice in the other person's share that you have something in common with? Or what wonderings do you have? All right. So sharing is always optional, but what's optional about it is how you share. That you share something is not optional. So if you don't wish to read from or talk directly from what is on your paper, you could always speak from what it was like to do the writing just now. Okay, so turn and talk. What do you notice in common and what wonderings might you have? If there's someone who has not talked yet, make sure they get to talk. If there's someone who didn't talk yet at your table, make sure that they get to now. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you can hear my voice, clap 3 times. If you can hear my voice, clap 4 times. Thank you. Okay, so I really would like to have about an hour of sharing out. We're not going to do that because I have been paid to comment through the talk and you have not, and I'm going to try to give what was ordered. But what I want to say is that I'm pretty sure every single table had some commonalities. And I pray that every table had some wonderings. The case I want to try to make in the next little bit is that writing matters, obviously, and that if we can pay attention to some specific ways it matters, and if we can then work on that from practiced principled stances, what we can do is not only help writing to matter in the lives of students, but we can sustain ourselves in the work. And in doing that, we're kind of like sustaining the whole, community of all of our people who have come before and those who have come after. So it's kind of a big call. Writing matters. It matters in some specific ways. And then if we teach and write and work from principles, we will find ourselves sustained in the work. Okay. I'm going to talk about our time writing was really important to me. And heads up, I am mentioning that I experienced sexual abuse as a child. I am not telling about it in a more descriptive manner than that. So if that's something that's disturbing to you to hear about it, good, you're human, it should be, but also I'm not going to continue down that path. What I want to talk about is some writing that I've done around that event in the last couple of years. So for reasons, I Googled the person who abused me in the last several years, found that person was working with children in a town where my parents live now. And I kind of started thinking about it, like, I wonder if anybody made a report. How can he still be doing it? I'm old. At that point, we were like 37, 38 years from when I had experienced abuse from this fella. And now he's working with kids. I wasn't thrilled. So I started making reports. And I don't know if you've had to make a historical report of child abuse, but it's really difficult because the systems are already garbage at taking live current threat reports. Okay. Think about all the times that reports are kind of, someone tries to make it, but it doesn't do anything, or it does the wrong thing and things get worse. Well, a historical report is also, they're very scared to take one, and it makes people uncomfortable. And in my case, a lot of years have passed and jurisdictions and bureaucracy, but I started making reports. And what you see in the picture there is that abuser who had a 50-year career of preying on children in the gymnastics context is in Texas prison right now. And you see documents related to a victim impact statement that I was able to give, even though my crime was out of statute by the time I hit high school. Here's some other writing. There I am on Good Day Austin, and I did some writing about my history and beliefs and needs around statutes of limitations to advocate for reform in Texas law in that area. It's hard to prevent child abuse if the only people who can report and get anything done are children, on account of those children just experience child abuse. It's an issue I care about. There I am writing for the newspaper. I'm talking on TV about it. I wrote poetry about it. I wrote in my notebook. I drew in my notebook. I wrote about it in therapy. I wrote about it on the airplane. I wrote about it in the bedroom at my parents' house. The writing that I'm showing you that I did was important, right? I hope that you would agree that that's important writing. It wasn't easy. It was not fun writing. I don't even know if it was effective writing in the sense of how people talk about writing right now. Like, on the one hand, yeah, I mean, he's in prison, but truly, my writing didn't really do that. So was it effective? I'm proud, and yet there's more work to do. It certainly wasn't efficient. 40 years of trying to write something is a long time. So let me kind of step out of my personal, childhood experiences. I'm proud of what I did, but at the same time, it's been garbage. My mental health is not great. I've been, physically unhealthy. It's been hard, but I think it's important, and I think it shows some things that matter for us today in this meeting. So first of all, the writing's important. Yeah, okay. The importance can be described in a couple different ways that you might have heard before. They resonate with research that we have, or with standards that we have, or policies. So for example, writing can be important in getting things done politically. Writing can be important therapeutically. Writing can be important for discernment and decision making. Writing can be important for persuasion, changing minds. Writing can be important just for witness bearing. Writing can be important to show beauty, which oftentimes means showing something kind of ugly too. Weird how that is. Writing can be important in all of these ways, right? Writing matters. But at my job, I did share some of that writing once in an annual report. And the dean wrote back and asked if I could just share a more normal annual report. I mean, I kind of don't blame him. Now it's a her, but I kind of don't blame him. But also, it reminded me of the time when I was a first-year teacher, and a principal was going to come and do their observation of me for the year. You get 3 observations or something. And students were working on revising, and they were in clusters around the room, and I was going around and helping people with their papers. And the principal came, and of course he came a little late, and he saw what was going on, and it was very loud. And I was kneeling. At first he couldn't see me, and I was a lot younger and less teacher looking and less different from the children at that time. And he said, I'll come back on a day you're teaching. Right? So that kind of like, what? Are we even talking about the same thing when we talk about writing? Because I felt like that's my best teaching, is the day when writers are at work and I'm going around trying to be with them, right? But it didn't look like teaching. And I think the denial of writing's importance is important to notice. So let me kind of say a little bit more about that. And I'm sorry, I'm carrying lots of things and got all these slides and whatnot. This is who I am. My name's Anne. I work at Penn State. There's some stuff I wrote. All right. That's what I'm going to say. Writing is important and hard. It's not efficient. I mean, writing is like the slowest thing you can teach. It's so slow that pre-test, post-test studies of writing interventions hardly ever show any effect. Ask me how I know, because writing project has had to justify itself, and we did a bunch of studies of that kind, and I did some of them. And it's really hard to have enough happen in between, a pre-test and a post-test with writing. Writing is also super inefficient because all the kids are writing different things, or all the adults are writing different things, and everybody knows different vocabulary, and everybody has different frames of reference. Also, there's all these emotions in writing that are super hard. Also, they're sticky, they're emotions. And we're kind of presented with a view of writing that is transactional, that is about satisfying a reader upward, right? Like writing the memo the way the boss wants. I hear this all the time, and I'm sure you have too. Your boss isn't going to care how you feel about that. Your boss isn't going to care about variations in language conventions. Well, your employer someday isn't going to care. Actually, why not? First of all. And second of all, yeah, one thing writing can do is satisfy a person in power over you. But my understanding and experience is that it kind of builds power from below, right? When I write, I know a lot more about what I think or believe or feel. And when I share the writing, other people have to know. And then suddenly we're not alone. And if you think about how do groups of people get power over other groups of people, or how does an individual get abusive power over another individual, it is by isolating them from the others, right? So I think oftentimes we're handed a view of writing that is writing to be correct enough to do the job that it was assigned for in the eyes of the audience who is the powerful audience. And what the writer thinks about or experiences, or what co-writers or what readers experience outside of that framework, it's all just sort of erased. But I don't know about you, isn't that the juice? Isn't that the good part? I don't know. If your whole career was teaching about how to address a business letter, would we be doing this? No, I don't think so. Because first of all, AIs can write that now. I'm very grateful. I got tired of doing that stuff. And second, of all, because it's just in the book, you just look it up. I never once, listen, I grew up in school before we had a computer in the classroom. There was a lesson every year on how to format the top of the business letter. I learned that in first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, and on and on. And I have since gone on to write many business letters. And not once have I remembered or cared how it was supposed to go. If I thought someone else would care and I cared to, humor them, then I looked up an example. And it was not that hard, right? So we're fed this task as teachers of writing or students as the learners of writing. And then what you're supposed to do is to learn to walk this very boring trail. Along the way, nothing will happen to you except for you will be acted upon by the forces that are already in power. That's garbage to me. I think of writing as being a fire that lights up the energy it takes to do the difficulty, right? If we do writing that is unimportant, why bother? It's hard. It's slow. It's inefficient. It hogs up all the time that could be spent on more measurable, immediately rewarding things. So if the idea of teaching writing is just to teach how to make it right, who would want to work on that? And that's why a lot of kids and a lot of us adults don't work on it. Because it feels pointless, because it is pointless. So importance. Okay, let me kind of reel it in. Importance, writing that is important matters because there is no way to learn writing without doing writing, and we won't do writing if it isn't important. Does that make sense? So importance is this fuel for the fire of the effort. If I were going to go hiking on a trail, if I'm attentive to my needs, I'm going to put granola bars in my pocket and water and so on. With writing, if I'm going to do a challenging writing task that's going to have a ton of difficulty in it, I need to fuel up for that. So let me pick a topic that matters. Let me pick an occasion that feels important. Let me know that there's a reader who wants to hear what I'm going to say. Right? So, okay, we need importance. We need importance to fuel the fire. And if you want to know more about like the research around that, go for it. There's a lot of it, and I've written a lot of it, and it's in the books over there, and you can access it through this network that you're in. But I really want to touch this importance and difficulty for us as the practitioners of teaching, tutoring, and supporting fellow writers, okay? The first thing is that we have to spread the message that writing is hard because important things are hard. We're really used to difficulty when it comes to important goals, marathons. No one's like, yeah, I mean, I won a marathon. It's too hard, though. I don't think I'm going to do that again. I mean, no, the difficulty is the whole point of why someone registers to run a marathon, right? With writing, it's so often the opposite. It's like we're trying to make it easy. And then people feel that it was hard, and then they think they did it wrong. They're like the person who was taken advantage of and thinks that they're dumb because it happened. And writing is hard when it's important because important things are hard. Writing's a really hard task. I've written 4 books, and every single book was just impossible to write. I don't really remember how I wrote those at all. And there's a lot of other folks in the room who've written a ton, and you're great at it. People whose work I admire. Is it easy now? No, I don't know a single writer. Now, getting out of the difficulty is a little easier than it used to be, but I still get in all the same difficulty. Okay. Thank you. All right. So what are we going to do about this? I want to point you to this book, Growing Writers. This is the most recent book that's available over there. And I'll just kind of give you a spoiler, is that half the book is me really trying to unpack for us what is a principle. Because I'm of the opinion that if our practice is not attached by us to principles that are held dear to us, by us, that have been arrived at by us, that then what we are is kind of at sea. We're like a bits of paper kind of rising up from that fire, you know? We're burned up by it. Whereas when we have principles that are shared, that are indicative of our membership in a community, that are attached to the importance of writing, then we can stand firmly in that fire and be ready to move through the difficulty. So what is a principle, right? I thought I knew, and then I tried to write a book about one, and it was really hard. So when I'm saying a principle, I am not saying knowledge like what the research says, information. It's in the research, and there's information in it, but a principle is not just received, it is made. And it's remade by every one of us, even if it is something that's kind of known. So for example, I have known throughout my career that writing has these therapeutic powers, and it's pretty well documented in the research, and that research is pretty well known now. Writing lowers your heart rate. It's like meditating. It lowers your heart rate. It helps you make decisions. It helps us remember things. That's why we take notes during a lecture or something. Writing has this power, and yet I had to learn that I probably needed to write about my experience as a traumatized kid. I knew it. I've written books about it. And yet I still kind of had to make that knowledge again by doing it and by receiving some of the transformative benefits of it. Okay. Principles aren't static. It's not one and done. Principles are growing. Why? Because they belong to us humans, and we are variable and changing and never fixed, right? They say like you stop growing, you're dead. And I really do feel that that's true for our profession as well. Principles can grow from the past, but they are not just made in the past. So for example, in this room, there are, we are inheritors of traditions and principled knowledge from the Writing Project, which has its 50-year history and has been my main ancestral force in my career. We have received principles from the research around writing centers. We have received principles from faith communities or from cultural communities or from schools of thought, philosophies. It's not that we don't receive and use ideas from the past, but they remain alive and in the making. right? Otherwise, all you're doing is failing to fulfill whatever was in the past. And you have a job or a community where sometimes that's what people talk like. Like I'm in a faith community, for example, in which attendance at the house of worship is like way down. It's like less than half what it was before the pandemic. And that's really challenging because money and jobs and the pastures and the buildings and, you know, all of that, right? And yet, I've stopped going to meetings about it because what they talk about is how it used to be and why and how it's not like that anymore. And I am aware that it is not like that anymore. And same thing, you know, in education, there are a lot of things that have changed in my career and in most of yours too. Even if you're a high school student right now, there's some things that you were freer to do as a student a couple years ago than you are now. But okay, that's where we are. So it's not enough to know what was in the past. We are making it alive. Principles for practice might involve knowledge that others helped us to build, but it's our own, meaning we had a chance to accept or reject it. You know, those of you who have children, if you ever try to get them to put on their boots or something to go outside, and there's this way that you can make them want to put on their boots, kind of help them think that it's a good idea to have boots instead of just saying, put on your boots. Right? And it doesn't always work, right? But the best way is if you can have people take it on their own. But oftentimes for teaching, we are simply told how it shall be and why. And we are not offered an opportunity to engage with that and decide whether it's correct for us. Right? So in my home district where I have been doing professional development for 30 years, it is now the case that there is a scripted curriculum for writing that teachers are being handed to use. Right? And some of the ideas in it are pretty good, and some of them are less good, but they weren't asked. I wasn't invited to that meeting, and I've been invited to every curriculum meeting about writing since I moved to my town, right? So there's things, right, that we own and choose. A principle is not neutral. Everything's political. Principles are too. Sorry. Principles are not only abstract and distant from the classroom, they're alive in every moment. All of the principles that are in the book are things that we're kind of experiencing right now together. Principles also aren't a map of practice. The difference between principles and, say, a scripted curriculum is the principles are ideas with space around them and among them. They're like tree branches that you can hang great practices on and experiences on, and you can build relationships in the boughs of the branches. Whereas a script is just sort of like, there it is. And it's meant to be a total guide of what to do. Of course it isn't, because the humans always break it. Okay, so principles, they're alive, they're stances, they're values, but they're not just that. They're not just beliefs. And so that's the other thing that happens. In fact, in the book, I'm building on this list of principles that NCTE came up with. A group of us met in committee meetings over years and read research and things and wrote these principles. That document in a former iteration was called Beliefs About the Teaching of Writing. And I liked it because I do believe those principles to be true. But they're not only beliefs, they're beliefs and they are linked to knowledge that we together have generated and that we together have vetted. Okay, so the science of blank, just to give you an example. There are all kinds of knowledge-making activities with the name science. And a lot of them are super informative, including lots of things that are right now being called the science of reading or the science of writing. Like a lot of very good work with good information in it is there. However, there are other sources of knowledge that, if left out, kind of break the utility of that principle, right? It's like how if you have a bridge, it has to be able to flex a little bit. Otherwise, it's like in Pennsylvania, we have this Kinsua bridge that it was too stiff and it basically exploded in a windstorm and came down, right? There has to be some flexibility. All right, so why principles? Principles make our instruction more coherent and intentional. I want to challenge you to be like my first teaching friend. It was like, you know how you have like kind of a work spouse, so like you might call that person your work wife or your work husband or, you know, your work sister or whatever. That person, for me, the very first one, we had grade books, not a laptop in the classroom back then. And he had written on it with a magic marker, why are we doing this? Every time he looked at the roll or tried to write down a score of any kind, he had to face his own voice asking him why he was doing it, right? Principles make our instruction more coherent and intentional because we all have these like bags of tricks of things that would be cool to do, and we're handed a lot more of them. If you want to think up a cool way to spend 25 minutes with writers, like there's a lot of cool ideas, and most of them are great. But how do you pick, right? Or how do the learners know that how those things are linked? Principles make your instruction more coherent and intentional. Principles make your instruction grounded. They help you select and adapt. All right. I'm that Pinocchio. I've done in my classroom literally everything I swore I would never do. Principles help me to get honest about that. Okay. Principles help to make our practice shareable because practice is so specific, right? I mean, if you've ever gone to something where a teacher was sharing and there's somebody in the back going, oh yeah, my kids won't do that, or that won't work in my classroom because, or even in a high school classroom where, you know, the scenario that's given feels too distant from the experience of the students, right? When we're linking things to principles, then we can share them grouped around the principles. And the variation in context and in approach and execution kind of makes more sense, right? And then finally, when we have principles, we are bound to ask questions and reflect. Right? So what's the difference between a classroom where writing is important and liberating and empowering to writers and readers and worth doing the hard work? It is a classroom full of questions. It is a classroom where everybody's doing new stuff that they don't really know how to do, and everybody's having to kind of wing it. Right? So when you're writing something that you've never written before, that's a good sign that you're doing important work. If writers in your care are writing something that you personally have never written, that's an opportunity to, first of all, write with them and try it. But second of all, some real learning is going to happen because whatever it is you had planned, that's gone. So now we're going to have to think together. Right? So principles kind of help break the lesson in the right way, a way that provokes our questions, but they're questions that are fun and juicy. These are the principles in the book that come from this NCTE document. They don't just come out of the air. They come from research done by members of that organization. They come from voices of classroom teachers from various levels who were very intentionally represented in the conversation. It's a pretty good list. There are others. NWP has had, for many years, they had a thing called the basic assumptions, and there are still obviously lists of statements we can stand behind about writing or teaching. Lists of principles are available to you, and you can find some that you like. But I want to look at this one specifically. When I look at them, what I see is that these are threaded together by the fact that they're all about the human parts of things, right? So it's humans that have these multiple purposes for writing, many at a time. And sometimes they're writing without even knowing why we're doing it, right? It is social relationships. It is reaching various audiences. The socialness of writing is where the importance comes from. Even for me in my journal, right? Because it was helping me to assess who and where I was in the fabric of my experience. Okay, so our connection to principles is like a thread linking us to one another, to writers who have come before, to teachers who have come before. And they keep our work and us as individual practitioners kind of sewn in to why we're doing it, so that we don't have to then go on a retreat to get back to why teaching feels good. Hard things can feel pretty good when they matter. And teaching is going to be hard no matter what we do. Hard things feel garbagey when they don't even matter, you know? So for example, when there's forms to fill out, sometimes it's forms helping about a student that I care about. And I know the reader of the form is going to do something great. Other times it's just a form. Who's even reading it? I don't know. We can all tell the difference. So principles are what stitch us to one another and to the importance of our work. All right, so you want some strategies to kind of help you tap the importance of writing with students and colleagues and yourself? Here are some. So in the book, Teaching Writers to Reflect, this is a book in which second and third grade writers were doing all of the lessons that we would lead, but the next time they wrote something, it was as though they hadn't even been there. So, you would spend a week doing introductions or how to do dialogue, say, and then the very next thing they wrote, they wouldn't have any dialogue, or they'd say, I don't know how to start my story. And we'd say, well, remember last time when we XYZ, when we did that lesson? No, the truth is school goes by real quick and people don't remember what's going on. And young children, like in that book, they don't remember what they had for breakfast. And I don't remember what I meant to say kind of right now. Do you see what I mean? Like none of us is really on top of it. Okay, so that's what that book's about. It's about helping people reflect on what they've done in school so it's not just going through the motions. And one thing that we do with writers of all kinds is I'm a writer who. I'm a writer who. I challenge you right now to write a sentence. This starts with I'm a writer who. I ask that question all the time. I'm a writer who. I'm a writer who struggles to get it done. I'm a writer who finds that I feel better after I do it. I'm a writer who used to be able to spell better than I can now. I'm a writer who. It's a generative question because, first of all, a lot of spaces that we're in, the writer has been erased and all that's there is the written product. So by saying I'm a writer who, you've already got the writer in the active voice, the main character of the sentence, and you've got a writer who persists and sustains some characteristics across the various writing events. Okay, so although I wrote lots of different things around the reporting and eventual conviction of the person who abused me when I was a kid, I was the writer who. Right? So there's a cumulative kind of story making that is happening across all those different writing experiences and different genres and different audiences and stuff that we don't have if it's just produce an op-ed, fill out this report, tell your feelings in a journal so that they're outside of you. I'm a writer who threads it together by putting the writer back in things. Another exercise or activity that I always find generative is about labels. You can read about this in Coaching Teacher Writers, but also I'm just going to tell you what it is. A group of people think together and brainstorm a list of all the labels that you see used in your setting. So for teachers in the classroom, a lot of times this would be labels that we put on kids, like he's a low reader, or he's a medium writer, or he's an IEP, which as an author of parts of many IEPs and as a teacher and mom of kids, and I should have had them. I mean, I have used that language. I hope I caught myself every time. Nobody is an IEP, right? I'm autistic, but I'm not an autism. I am autistic and I'm a human being, right? So labels, brainstorm all of these labels, and then can you pick one? And in your writing, put it on yourself. Or put it on a different person. Or find out who wrote the magic marker on that label. Do you understand what I mean? So for example, students in my high school classroom, this is my second job, when I first got there, they'd say, Miss, do we have an essay today? And I was like, well, we're gonna write many essays over the year. And, I'm kind of like trying to understand that question. And they're like, no, do we have an essay today? Like Mr. Kirk has an essay today. And so like looking into that, what I found was that was the day that he was doing a timed writing of an essay for which students had prepared the day before by filling out an organizer and stuff. So we have an essay we have a timed writing. All right. So that's an example of like unpacking a label. And then one more strategy, and then I'm mindful of the time. But I'm also just not good at time. So I'm sorry. This is who you invited. Inkwell. Inkwell. In Inkwell, it's a book in which I take all of the things that I do with teachers and students and at workshops like this and things that I learned from you. And I just tried to use them on myself. I wrote it during the time at home during the pandemic. During that period of time, both of my kids were not doing great mentally. I was divorcing. Bad things were happening in the world. It was hard times. And I made an intentional practice of just doing a lot of the writing activities that I had on my computer. And that grew into this book, which is an invitation for any human, but mostly adults. And I would include a teenager as an adult in this instance. Writing through, using our practices to do some discernment and reflection on yourself as a spiritual being, whether that's participating in a faith tradition, whether it's leaving a faith tradition, whether it's communicating with God or a divine force, or whether it's wishing for that. So it's a book for anybody, I hope, in any faith story. But in place, I sit in a place that I've sat in many times, like my living room. And I just say, in this room, I see, in this room, I smell, in this room, I hear. It's a sensory activity like almost everyone here has probably done. But you do it somewhere you've been many, many times. And you keep going until you see something new. And then you keep going until you notice something new about that in this place. So all of these strategies, which are not miraculous, most of them I got from y'all. So, I've heard them before. They are principled. They are principled. They link to those statements that our community has helped me to hold on to. So that when a script comes my way, or so that when I feel like I only have time to go over the reading, which happens a lot, or when I am tired and I don't really want to go to teach, which, I'm just owning that. Not all of us want to go teach our class every day, just like not every student wants to go every day. Doesn't mean it's not a good class, right? Like, can we just say that? Like, you don't always feel like going. I don't always feel like writing, man. It's hard. I don't always feel like doing that. I'm tired, right? When we do these practices, they're familiar for a reason. They link us back to why we are doing this. And when we have why we are doing it, we got fire desire, which then gives us the energy we need to do the writing, which then reconnects us to one another. So for you, the human being who is a writer or a tutor or a teacher, what I would want for you to take from today is this, and I'm actually going to look at my paper so that I don't mess it up. In case my talk hasn't made sense, I'm now going to tell you what it meant. Okay. So first of all, your work is important. Your work is important. Not everything in your job is important. And I'm sorry for us that is true. But it is true. It's true about life. I don't think there's a profession in which that's not true. Same thing for students. Man, there's a lot going on at school that is not important. And I am sorry. My experience going to high school was pretty much forcing myself to go be uncomfortable, doing things that I did not know what the importance was. The importance, I was told, was doing it so that I would be ready to do some other important thing later. But it did not feel very important right now. And what's more, it's like I couldn't envision that later. And I also sort of didn't care about it. That was what other people wanted for me, not what I wanted for me. Because I didn't even know what I wanted for me, because I didn't know who I was, because I hadn't done enough writing. Like, when we are working in ways that are centered on the importance of the human being doing the writing, we will find ourselves energized. So your work is important. And your identity in this work of supporting other writers is important, because it is in our shared writing activities that we really embody and enact what is powerful about writing. It's marks on a paper. It's etching in the sand. It's not anything except for when we are together around it. So your work is important. Your identity in the work is important. What you write from your own human heart is important. And when you do it, when you teach in a way that just lets human beings be human, and when you show up as a human being writer with your colleagues and students and day to day, which is hard. Bring your tissues, man, it's hard. When you do that, what you do is you insist for us, for all of us, that a person is worth more than what we can produce for somebody else. Writing's important when it's not just fulfilling somebody's request, right? We also are important in that way. And when you show up and you use writing in that way, and you be as fully vulnerable in it as you have to be, because writing's really hard, you are insisting on that. You are standing in the principles that will sustain us together through writing. It is to insist that human beings have inherent value. And that for me is a core belief in pretty much all of my communities, from my faith community to this one here as represented in this room. We have a value other than what we produce. It is something that we just have, because to be a human being is a sort of weird miracle. I am a really weird kid, and yet it's kind of a miracle. Like, I made it here. Like, at this moment, look at all these people. Look at all these stories all sort of intersecting. I mean, I'm being hokey about it, but it's a freaking miracle. And this will never happen again. We are so like every other group of people that there is, but we are also right now one unique little piece of starlight. So I care about that. Here's my my sort of sacred secular benediction for you today. It's, may your teaching and writing be principled. May your community of practice, our community of practice, gathered here and wherever you work, be strong and safe. May your writing life be lively and loving and important. Right on. Thanks for having me. So I stink at time. I'm literally time blind. And also, like, this day has been different than many of us thought. It's okay. I'm here. I will talk to you. I will sell you a book. I'll sign a book for you. I will talk to you even if you're not purchasing something from me. Like, but I'm sorry that it's like that. I'm just here as a resource. And then that's how you can reach me. And you can read all of my personal and professional things, and you can follow up. And I'm terrible at email, but I do answer it. And I want to receive email from people, including, a 15-year-old, and including somebody that I talked to today and I've forgotten your name. You know what I mean? So, all right, thanks.
Hey, thank you so much. Anne's little table is there. So on your way out, if you want to find one of her books, if you want her to sign a book for you, do you want to just sit over there, Anne, and they can find you there?
Yeah, I'm just going to go there.
Yeah, she's going to go to that table. Okay, perfect. What comes next? We have a couple more sessions today. We will be going back to the Tanner building to do those final 2 sessions. And if your name was called at the beginning for a raffle, then you can find your raffle prize on the way out this door. Can I make a quick request? If you are a CUWP fellow, will you just come up here on your way out? We're just going to take a quick CUWP photo. Okay, thank you.
And if you didn't get the list